Welcome everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you for joining me. If you're new to my channel and you haven't already clicked the subscribe button, please help support my channel by clicking the button for me, and as an added bonus, you'll be able to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music. All right, we're going to take a look today at a brand new Lynch Mob album, and if the cover of this looks familiar to you, it's because it is a 30th anniversary reimagining of the original Wicked Sensation album all the way back from 1990. And so this one here, as I said, is a reimagined version of it and a re-recording of it. Before George had formed Lynch Mob, he was in a bunch of other bands, of course, most notably Dokken. So going back to the late 1970s, George was in a group called The Boys, and then he later formed a group called Exciter before in 1980 joining Dokken. And their debut album, Breaking the Chains, was released in 1981. It was originally a Don Dokken solo release. Later, of course, it would be remixed and partially re-recorded, and then ultimately re-released 1983 to bigger acclaim. Neither one of the two really did a whole lot at the time. It wasn't until their follow-up album, the second album, Tooth and Nail, which came out in 1984, that the band actually achieved platinum status. And then their next two albums would do the same thing. We have Under Lock and Key from 1985, and then we have Back for the Attack in 1987, both of these going platinum. But in 1989, the band decided to go its separate ways, and so at that point, George decided to form Lynch Mob. He used his last name along with the word mob to create that title. And so the lineup for this group was Mick Brown on drums, former Dokken drummer there, Anthony Esposito on bass, Ani Logan on vocals, and of course George Lynch on guitars. And so they released their debut album, Wicked Sensation, in 1990, and this one featured two really successful singles on it, the title track as well as River of Love. And while the album itself didn't achieve the platinum status that the previous Dokken albums did, this one did sell 500,000 copies and was certified gold, which was quite a big feat. And then following the tour, things weren't gelling with vocalist Ani Logan, and so they replaced him with Robert Mason. And then they recorded their follow-up, which was a self-titled album, and released it in 1992. And this one here featured the big radio hit Tangled in the Web, as well as a cover of the Queen classic Tie Your Mother Down. And in 1991, this was a time when Queen and Freddie had just passed, so that was on everybody's mind, which was probably why they chose to do that recording at the time. Now, unfortunately, due to the changing musical scene and the rise of grunge, the album just didn't do as well as the debut did, and at the end of the tour, George decided to disband the group. Later, of course, George would reactivate the band and use a revolving door of musicians over the years. Both Robert Mason and Ani Logan have acted as vocalists throughout that time, but since 2009, Ani Logan has appeared on all of the newer Lynch Mob albums. Sometimes, though, George had gone out on the road with different vocalists, but for each of the studio recordings, they are all with Ani Logan. So, of course, he's a staple and fixture in the current lineup of Lynch Mob. Which brings us to this release and recording here, Wicked Sensation Reimagined, 30th Anniversary Edition of the album. And so it contains 12 tracks, which are the same as the original album and in the same running order, but they have been completely reimagined and re-recorded. And so the lineup for this album here is a little different than the debut. We've got, of course, George Lynch on guitars and Ani Logan on vocals. Then we've got Brian Tichy on drums and Robbie Crane on bass. All of the guys, of course, being previous members of Lynch Mob throughout the years. The album has less of that dated 90s metal feel to it, as the sound has been updated for the 21st century. The songs still rock, of course, but have more of the original groove accentuated in them. The title track, Wicked Sensation, is a really good example of this reimagining, where it accentuates the groove and the funk of the original track. And one of the tracks that really caught my ear on this album, here at least the reimagined style of it, was track number 9, No Bed of Roses. Check this one out. I think it's a really interesting version here. In particular, I really like Brian Tichy's drumming on it. And so for the album as a whole, though, there's no real surprises to it. It's just really good, solid reimagining of the album, giving it that more modern feel without losing any of the sort of flair and style of the original Lynch Mob album and sound. Ani Logan is still sounding just as powerful as ever with a lot of emotion in his vocals. I think he just gets better and better with each release. And while I like the drumming of Mick Brown on the original, I do think Brian Tichy's drumming here is one of the standout features of this album. George Lynch is just as fiery as ever, as he has been over the last 30 years. And while I don't think this is going to replace the original, I do think it's a really nice addition to their catalog. So let's take a look at it here. Here's the original, and let's look at it again with the debut just to see the two different covers there. This one here's got more of a sketch version to the way that they've done that. And then there's the spine and the back side of it. And if we open it up here, spin the disc around so you can see that. This is the inside of it, and if I pop out the disc, you get to see a little larger and large sketch of it under there. And then I'll pull out the booklet here, which is really pretty minor. There's the front cover again. It has no write-up or anything on the inside, and of course no lyrics. I don't know that we need the lyrics, but it would have been great if we could have gotten a history of the album, or a track-by-track review of the album, or even some thoughts about why they reimagined it the way that they did. But we do get this really great band shot, and then the backside with some thank yous and some minor credits. Not really, again, a whole lot going on. And so in closing, I want to touch on something here that's come up in the news recently regarding Lynch Mob and the band name itself. So this is kind of a side note here, but bear with me. With the recent civil unrest that has been surrounding racial injustices, attention has been brought to things that have cultural insensitivities to them. And so things such as like there's been removings of Confederate War and Civil War statues. And then there's been another thing where artists have been changing their name to be more culturally sensitive. So George Lynch has decided to retire the band name Lynch Mob due to its troubled past. And so George says, while he's not going to tour under the name Lynch Mob anymore, he will still play with the guys, but he'll just probably do it under a different name. And so while this release here was intended to celebrate the 30th anniversary of both the debut album Wicked Sensation as well as the history of the band itself, it's now actually going to be the final release for Lynch Mob, putting a nice cap on the overall career of the band. All right, so in the future, we're going to have to look out for Lynch Mob under a different name. Maybe George will join another group. I'm hoping he'd maybe form a new supergroup of sorts or something, and or finally get back together with Dokken, who knows. But this certainly does open up the door for George to do something new. We'll just have to wait and see. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you did, please remember to comment, like, and subscribe. Take care, and everyone have a great day. Bye-bye.